Okay, thank you very much, Reem, for the introduction. Welcome, everybody. And first off, congratulations to everybody who's racing in a couple of weeks at the Ironman World Championship 2021 edition in 2022. So we're going to go over that event, and this presentation will be similar-ish to a presentation given in the fall when the 70.3 World Championships were held in the same venue. Okay, except double the distance this time. So first off, in QT2 world, we always have 5 training cornerstones, really 5 training and racing cornerstones: training, nutrition and rest, event fueling, pacing, and mental training or mental fitness. This presentation intends to hit on pieces of each cornerstone. And what you can really think of in terms of the cornerstones is the cornerstones form what I would consider to be the fence posts, which create a barrier of protection around you. When you have each of these 5 cornerstones in place, you have this kind of pentagonal fortress around you and protecting you as you train and race for an event. It doesn't mean that nothing can go wrong. It just means that you've done the planning in your training, the planning in your nutrition and rest, the planning in your fueling, the planning in your pacing, and the planning with your mental fitness. Plans don't always go into effect, as Mike Tyson once said. Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. But as useless as plans can sometimes be, planning is always priceless. All right, so that's that presentation. So here we are. We are about 3 weeks out from the event. 3 weeks, maybe 2 weeks. We are about 2 weeks out from the event. So we are kind of in that phase where this is kind of entering into the dress rehearsal piece of the race preparation. If we were on a plane, it would be approaching the airport and the pilot would have come on to the loudspeaker and told us that we are making the initial descent and we can start to put away large electronics and tray tables. Okay, this is where we are going to start to make sure we have all of our low-hanging fruits in order. If we're using tri-bike transport, we are making sure we know our bike's drop-off date at our local bike shop to make sure we don't miss it. If you need a last-minute tune-up, this is the time to get it done. Also, you should be on the lookout for an email from active.com, which will have this QR code, and this QR code will will prompt you to select check-in times for your bike and gear check-ins, your run gear check-in, and you're going to need this QR code. So be on the lookout for a QR code. This code that I have on the screen is not it. Okay, so don't use that code. You use that code, you're probably going to end up on some weird website. Who knows? But you'll be receiving something from active.com. And while you are going to be seemingly pigeonholed into committing to a time for these drop-offs, it hasn't seemed to be the case that Ironman is holding athletes firmly to the times that they select. It seems to be the case that what is happening is these selection times, you're going to say, I'm going to drop off my bike somewhere between 10 and 11 a.m. on Friday before the event. I'm going to drop off my gear bag from 12 to 1 on Friday. And while they're not checking those times on you, but the selection of times seems to be doing a really good job of thinning the herd so that they don't have too many people in any one place at any one time, just kind of due to COVID protocols and all of that. So, and it seems to be working. The events that I have been to, those processes have been more sparsely populated while still servicing the same number of people. Okay, so it's still 3 weeks before. The best that we can do at this point is to know approximately about what is coming: temperatures, humidity, and et cetera, stuff like that, and just begin to process some of the preparing for the different temperatures you were going to experience, and perhaps the humidity or lack thereof, depending where you're coming from. If you are coming from Southern Florida to go, I shouldn't say coming, if you're going to St. George from Southern Florida, then it may very well feel like the air conditioning is on when you're racing, because while you may have the same, somewhat same air temperatures, the humidity will be significantly less in St. George. If you're coming from the Northeast, it is, say, for example, today was a high of, say, 52. It was a bit of a chill in the air when the wind blew, even though there was a little bit of humidity. So in St. George, around this time of year, it's the desert, so you're going to see temperatures range from the 50s to the 80s. And after noon, those temperatures can really skyrocket. So this is our time to kind of mentally prepare for that. And if you can start to think about, if you have been training in colder conditions, it may be time to start doing some heat acclimation. Okay, can you up the hydration ante a little bit now? It will put you in a better position to be able to handle those kinds of intakes on race day at race intensity. So can you kind of overdress now a little bit for one session per day, forcing yourself to create a sweat rate that would be commensurate with the conditions that you'll experience in St. George, which will then hopefully force you to drink more at a faster rate, and just kind of train the gut a little bit if you haven't been doing that already. Also, when racing in these conditions that are, while hot, extremely low humidity, it can be, you can become forgetful about drinking. And in my experiences in these very dry conditions, the dry air kind of sucks the hydration right out of you, and you don't sweat. It's not nearly as obvious. Your sweating is not nearly as obvious, and so therefore there's a disconnect, and you may forget that you need to drink. So you have to be a little more aware of the fact that you need to drink. And oftentimes, by the time you realize that you needed to drink, it's too late. So that's just something to be aware of, particularly if you're going from a humid area to St. George. Okay, so race week. Our kind of, these are the things: stay off your feet, rest, pretty much. Okay. You want to eat pretty normally. There are a couple of exceptions. You have your fat load, which is on Monday for this race because the race is on a Saturday. Your fat load meal, which should consist of something like, now this is not a license to go out and eat a big ice cream sundae. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a nutrient dense, fat focused meal. So we're talking about a turkey burger with cheese, maybe some guacamole or avocado with bun, sweet potato fries, that kind of thing, not an ice cream sundae. Okay, so healthy kinds of fat. And typically speaking, that studies have shown that a fat focused meal about 5 days prior to the carb load helps the body to absorb the carb load a little bit better. Okay, and then you eat pretty normally until Friday, which is going to be your big breakfast. This is also a good time to make sure that if you're on electronic shifting, which most people are now, I should say, that everything's charged. Okay, this course in particular is not the kind of course where you want derailleur batteries to die on you. This would be considered a very rugged single speed course. So that now is a really good time to make sure those things are in order. Race week, we basically want to, the goal is to kind of, in an ideal world, you would get wheeled to the starting line in a wheelchair and just dumped into the water, expending as little energy as possible prior to the cannon going off. From a hydration standpoint, this is all week we should really be considering, it should be working on hydration. Hydration is a state of being It's not something that you should just do because you're racing tomorrow. Our goal should be to be in a constant state of hydration. But many of us probably struggle with that at times. And now is a good time to really focus on that, being 2 weeks out, but really in worst case during race week. During this time, during race week, and when you're focusing on hydration, try to avoid the zeros. I say quote unquote zeros. So the Gatorade zeros, the Powerade zeros, these are drinks that have flavor without sugar, and that has to come from somewhere. Usually it comes from sugar alcohols or fake sugars, and those can be stressful on the gut. We do not need gut stress during race week. Okay. So let's avoid things like that. Let's avoid too much noon. Okay. That's another thing that people like to do, is they overload on noon, which again is flavor without any cost, and there's no such thing as a free lunch. So if we're getting flavor during race week, we want it to be coming from a source, and that source should be sugar. Okay, we don't want things that are going to cause gastric distress. And then just, really, this is a good time. Water and real sports drink. Water, real sports drink. Just go back and forth, and it's okay during race week to, if you have 24 ounces of water, take a salt tab with it. Okay, just to make sure you're getting the electrolytes in. If just as a side note, now I'm going off script, but if you have had in the past, after or days before a race, the morning of a race, where you have heavily hydrated, and this typically happens in warm weather races because people will tend to kind of oversaturate themselves in preparation for a hot weather race. If you had cramping in those kinds of situations, it may be a really good idea to supplement your hydration with a magnesium supplement. Moxie Life is an excellent option. Okay, but one of the reasons being is this kind of unexplained cramping that can occur, really when you haven't even done any physical activity. Several years ago now, we had a couple of athletes who just kind of mysteriously cramped on the pier at Kona before the race even began. And it took a little bit of thinking and thought to figure out that what probably occurred was such a focus on hydration, and the athletes did a good job of hydrating, but in the process, they flushed out some of the other electrolytes from the body that aren't necessarily always covered by our sports drinks. So, and that most notably can often be magnesium. So this is a good time to, if it won't hurt to throw in a little magnesium, a little Moxie Life into your hydration scheme. All right. Okay, lost my place a little bit. All right. On the days before, during check-in, you get your bags. Check-in is Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday at your pre-registered times, quote unquote. What I recommend with this is register, get your bags, lay them out in the living room or in your bedroom, wherever you're staying. Put your stickers on, and then pack your bags, check them twice, and get rid of them. Okay, and then go over to your bike, put your race numbers on your bike, put your nutrition on your bike, get your race wheels on, take it out for a spin. So prep your bike, take it out for a spin, and get rid of it. All right, we want to kind of make sure we want to prepare, we want to check, and then we want the stuff out of our minds. Okay, so that we don't start fiddling. Okay, one of the worst things that not worst things, but something that can happen to athletes, particularly the day before a race and a big race, is when the gear is around, they can start to try to perfect situations. And oftentimes when we try to perfect a situation, we just end up screwing it all up. So just pack, prep, pack, check, get rid of. Okay. And then those final few days, you'll see that there is a lot going on around this event. I have not yet been to the event, though I'm planning to attend. But there's a there's a fun run, there's a banquet, there are mandatory race briefings, which I do recommend. But you are there to race, okay? You should do I recommend doing as little as you must do and spending the rest of the time in a state of relaxation. If you can attend a race briefing via Zoom, I'm not quite sure if they're doing that for this event, do that, okay? But you want to stay away from the fun runs and the banquets and all of the hoopla. If you are focused on a race, on a true, I shouldn't say race experience. If you're focused on performance, then we want to avoid these things. If you are there for a world championship experience, then maybe you do want to check out these things, particularly the welcome banquet and the mandatory race briefing. But that's to each his own on that. Just in the final few days, I highly recommend the swim venues is very, it's quite beautiful actually. Very, very nice. Chilly, quite chilly, and they're gonna have official swim access Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday in the mornings. I highly recommend getting in that water ahead of time. It's intended to be around between 56 and 60 degrees. That is not the kind of water temperature that you want to experience for the first time on race morning in a highly stressed, anxious mindset. Okay, so get out for those official swim times. Yeah, race day should not be the first time that you experience that water. And also just keep in mind that water is cold, and it may live in your mind that you want to compensate for how cold that water is. I have heard some stories. Actually heard a story yesterday of an athlete who's racing who somehow obtained a waterproof heated vest that she will wear under her wetsuit, in addition to a cap and I think booties. And it just seemed like a lot of overkill, a lot of overcompensation for there's how the water will feel during the week, and then there's how when you are, it's a pretty low key environment. Then there's how the water will feel when you are in the anxious environment of race morning, and your body is already just naturally heated. Your core body temperature is probably going to be up, a degree or two compared to Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and that is the kind of thing that you just want to keep in mind before thinking about taking some kind of overcompensation to take care of the water temperature. Okay. All right. The day before. So you're going to have your check-ins, your bike check-in, your run bag check-in. You just, of note, you're not going to have access to your gear bags on race morning. That's what they say. That I can't necessarily claim that rule is always 100% enforced, but that is the official policy as of right now. So just make note of that. Okay, that you're not going to be able to. You shouldn't plan that you would be able to put stuff into your race, into your either T1 or T2 bag on race morning. Okay, and when you are picking up your timing chip, you are picking up your timing chip, and sorry, when you drop your bike off, I usually like to actually just put it on at that point. I just put it on my ankle. I look, you might look a little ridiculous walking around with your timing chip on the day before the event, but you will never be that person who's scrambling around in race morning with a missing timing chip somewhere. Okay, yeah, it kind of works. And then just remember, timing chip on the left ankle to keep it away from the drivetrain on the bike. And then I just, depending exactly how the timing chips are, if it's a traditional timing chip setup, you may want to use a safety pin to just secure it, because those swim stats can be a little violent, and people sometimes pull some trickery out there, and they might pull it off, particularly in a world championship event. People can be ultra aggressive. There's a shuttle situation. It's available Tuesday through Friday during race week festivities. Race morning, the shuttles will begin at 3:15, a ridiculous time of day. All of the shuttles will get you to, so the purpose of most of the shuttles are to get you to the shuttle that will bring you to T1. Only one shuttle will bring you to T1, and that shuttle leaves from, it is shuttle number 4, and it leaves on race morning. It leaves from the Church of Latter-day Saints. That is shuttle number 4. If you can see my cursor, it's this one right here. You must take the shuttle to T1 on race morning. Okay, so don't be one of those people who thinks that the rules don't apply. The race venue is what I would consider to be, while an expansive area, the in and the out of the race area is pretty small and tight. It would be the best word I would have. So they're probably not going to let you in. You would probably end up being dropped off on the main road about 2 miles away, or 1.5 miles away from the race venue, from the swim venue. So just get on the shuttle and get there. And lastly, just make note of Tuesday through Friday. The shuttles are bringing you around to race week festivities. The word festivities, note that word. If you are there to race, let's focus on being festive after the race, not before. And then the day before, we have the day before, you'll probably be extremely nervous, and you'll have, after you'll have done all your drop-off stuff, or you will be doing your drop-off stuff, but in the morning, as early as you can, you want to have a big breakfast. Okay, the goal is to have a big breakfast and taper throughout the day, and then also hydration with a huge carbo load. The hydration helps the body to absorb the carbohydrates. The breakfast typically consists of a large stack of pancakes, a couple of eggs, hash browns. You want to limit the bacon, and you want to limit the coffee as best you can. But typically, most athletes leave the breakfast situation feeling absolutely terrible, just stuffed to the gills, and like they've taken in too much, and they kind of can't figure out how they're going to get through the rest of the day, because they've eaten so much. If you're there, you've done it well. And then the goal will be to kind of taper the food throughout the day. You spend the rest of the day snacking on salty snacks like pretzels. Salted pretzels are really good. Fat-free Fig Newtons are really good during the day. You want to have a small lunch, typically something like a for scale, like a 6-inch sub from Subway. Turkey, mustard is good. Limit the mayo, limit the veggies on the sub, kind of keep it pretty plain. A bag of chips is fine. A sports drink is fine as well. But that's your kind of lunch. You continue to snack throughout the day on the pretzels and the fat-free Fig Newtons. And then for dinner, just a small dinner, probably a cup of pasta, maybe a half a cup of pasta, and a half a chicken breast. You actually kind of want to go to bed feeling a little bit hungry, maybe a little bit hungry, because the next morning's breakfast will take care of that. So then we have our race morning breakfast. This is what is widely known in the QT2 world as the applesauce breakfast, the applesauce protocol. You're going to have it approximately 3 to 3.5 hours prior to the race, prior to your race start. Okay, so if your race starts at 6:45, you want to have your breakfast at no later than 3:45. Okay, if you can have it a little earlier, that's good too. The applesauce protocol, the breakfast, the whole point of the breakfast is to have something that is high in carbohydrate, low in fiber, low in fat, and not too much protein. So we have, you basically eat your body weight in applesauce, and then you typically have a banana and maybe a little whey protein shake. Studies have shown that a scoop of whey protein on the day of an endurance event can help performance, and a bottle of sports drink. You will feel terrible after this breakfast, but you've taken it in so long before the race start that you're good to go. But I highly recommend in these final 2 weeks to practice that kind of a protocol, the applesauce protocol. For somebody like myself, at 165 pounds, say, my race morning breakfast for an Ironman would be about 3¼ cups of applesauce. It is a mountain of applesauce. You could drown in it if you're not careful. It will leave you feeling very uncomfortable. It will hydrate you to the unbelievably. You'll be peeing like a racehorse, and the kind of the beauty of it is it moves the system, so to speak, and you'll be, I guess, for lack of a better term, typically you'll be fully evacuated before the race start if you have the breakfast at least 3 hours before the start. Let's see, race morning, take the shuttles, obviously, stay relaxed, bring warm clothes. You will be in a wetsuit, most likely, but have warm clothes because you're probably going to be standing around for a while and you're in the desert. So it's probably going to be in the 50s and kind of chilly a little bit. And then if you're able to get in for a swim warm up, definitely take advantage of that. You just don't want to be diving in to water of that temperature in an anxious state. So be used to it. Yeah, it's a good practice. Good for the heart, I would say. These are some cutoff times. The swim, you have 2 hours and 20 minutes to complete the swim course. The swim course will close at 10:28, which is 2 hours and 20 minutes after the last swimmer enters the water. The bike course, you have 10.5 hours to complete. To complete the swim, T1, and the bike course, those 3 things. There's this kind of funny rule. It applies on the bike and it applies on the run. That athletes have 15 minutes to get from the swim exit through T1 into bike mount line on the bike. And on the run, athletes have 10 minutes to get from the bike dismount line through T2 into the run start line. We believe that this 10-minute rule here is only applicable to those who are flirting with the cutoff times. We haven't seen different from that, but the enforcement of that rule seems probably unreasonable for most Ironman events, particularly in hot weather. I can't imagine that they would have a general rule. I don't believe that this rule is necessarily going to apply to the whole athlete population. I feel like it's going to only apply to those who are really close with the cutoffs. For instance, if you make the swim cutoff at 2:20, then you're going to have, if you make the bike cutoff such that you get off the bike at 6:38, then you have 15 minutes to get out onto the run course. And the same if you make if you get out onto the run, then you have 10 minutes to get through from the bike dismount line through T2 to the run start line. Because 10 minutes for all athletes, I can see that a lot of athletes would get pulled from the race in that situation. So I don't see that as a widely enforceable rule. Let's see. So the pros are going to start at 6:15. The pro men are going to start at 6:15. The professional women are going to start at 6:20. Then the age group waves will start at 6:45. 19 waves. The last wave entering the water at 8:06. Those are the females, 45 to 49. It's a rolling start per wave. And so that means that all of the females 45 to 49 at 8:06 will start entering the water 10 athletes at a time every 10 seconds. Okay, and only those women will start entering the water during that. Only those athletes will start entering the water at that time. So it's a rolling start within the wave. Okay, what I recommend is just kind of ask around to the athletes in your wave, find out what they're swimming. If you plan to swim a 120, say, and you're asking around and you find people who think they're going to swim 120 as well, I would look for people who are maybe going to swim closer to 117, 116. Okay, because most people tend to have at the swim start can oftentimes have kind of a very optimistic view of what their swim time will actually be. So I would definitely just kind of find your people, your 120s, and then say, okay, I think they're probably being optimistic. They're probably more like 124s, 125s. I'm going to look for people who think they are 116, 117, and they're probably going to be more like 120s, which would be like me. Okay. That'll tend to put you, I think, in the right spot. The swim course is basically a 7. It is buoys on your right. So we are out up here around this first turn buoy, a long stretch of swim, very tight turns here at the far end, and then coming back up, you're going to have to go buoys on your right, but you're going to have to keep this turn buoy here, this fourth turn buoy, I'm sorry, on your left. You're going to have to go around that buoy, so on the inside of the swim course, and in. Make sure you do that. That would be DQable if you didn't. So I can see that, or I can imagine that you are probably going to get hit with a bit of sun, some glare on the way out, okay, for the first half of the course, and should be probably okay on the way back. What else? I mentioned the buoy. And then with these rolling starts, 10 athletes at a time, that's every 10 seconds. That is a very tame way to start a race. I really like it. It really takes away the need to go out like a wild banshee at the beginning of a race, which is really important for a race of Ironman's distance. It allows you to race the distance more physiologically appropriate. So what I recommend is that you go out strong for the first 200 or 300 meters. Go not all out, but strong, probably a little bit faster than you could hold for a full 2.4 miles. And then when you, and that will just kind of set the tone and make sure you don't get lost, because everybody's probably going to be going out too hard. If you go out just a little too hard, that will keep you in their realm, and then settle in after about 300 meters, settle into your race pace. And at that point, once you find your race pace, find the feet in front of you that correspond to that race pace and settle in. Enjoy the ride. All right, that's the swim course. The bike course. Yeah, this is going to be a doozy. Very, very, very hilly. It kind of has the Ironman like placid feel to it, but I think probably on steroids. it has 66 feet per mile of climbing. That's very placid-like. But you're going to be in an area of the country where wind is a factor. Placid has a lot of trees. St. George does not, and so a lot of open land, and the winds can be very, very strong. So hills coupled with wind can make for a day. So this is going to be a very challenging course. There's 2 loops. There's an 86-mile loop and a 26-mile loop. There is what was I going to say there? So there also seems to be, in this kind of stretch here, this, if you can see my cursor, at about, I think it's about 50 to about 80. There's like 30 miles where you are like trending up. I won't say that you're climbing the whole time per se, but you're definitely not descending over the course of those 30 miles. And that's going to be a factor. Even if it's a grade of 0.5%, it's still going to be a grind, particularly if ends up being wind on portions of that. So for those reasons, because the climbs are going to be so long, this is going to be relative to the descents. The descents aren't short, but they're short relative to the climbs. This is going to be a slope. This is not a PR course, I guess I would say. It's a really, really important that you keep a check on your wattage during this race. Supremely important, particularly early on when you leave the swim venue. You're going to be flying down to the main highway out of Sandy Hollow, absolutely flying. And then you're going to take a left onto the main road, a left and a left, and you're just going to be grinding for a while. Very challenging terrain right off the bat. You kind of have to climb up to St. George from the swim venue just to begin the day of climbing. That, coupled with the fact that you're in a world championship environment, and there is going to be a lot of ego in Utah that weekend. So you really have to kind of put your blinders on and focus on what you are there to do and what your numbers are, focus on your wattages. So hills, people, and wind means you have those 3 things together can spell disaster if you let them get to you. You need to focus on your stuff, focus on your wattage, focus on your cadence. Supremely important. On a course like this, it can happen that you end up riding, because you're in a grinding situation with so much climbing, you can end up falling into, riding 3 to 4 RPMs lower than you normally might, which is going to potentially wreak havoc on your run when you get there. But the good thing about this course, and maybe I'll be wrong, maybe I'll be right, I'm not sure, we'll see, is that unlike Kona, I think that this course has the potential to really break up the draft packs, which would be nice. We'll see. Here is a graphic. I just kind of took the elevation profile and laid out just some of what I would consider to be the wattage approaches. And this is not an exact science, but it's just a general recommendation. So if you have miles on the bottom and an elevation on the vertical axis, I'm defining X as a baseline wattage. The wattage that you would ride kind of in a vacuum situation. Flat, nice, easy terrain, you would ride X watts. For some people, it's going to be 200. For some people, it's going to be 250. Other people, it's going to be 130. Depends who you are. But just kind of like a steady race day, flat terrain, Ironman type of wattage, X. Okay. Now that baseline wattage is going to adjust depending upon the terrain conditions. Okay. And so that's what I tried to do. I tried to break down the course into different sections and just give you a sense of how you would maybe approach those sections. Okay. Knowing that on a flat section, you would ride your baseline wattage, maybe a little bit. On a descent, you would probably tend, depending how steep it is, you would probably tend to ride just below the baseline wattage because it would be quite challenging it would be probably too challenging to get that wattage up because the resistance isn't there because of the descent. On a climb, where there is that resistance, you would tend to ride above your baseline wattage. For Ironman, we'll typically use an absolute cap of about 60 or 70 watts above baseline for climbs, where the athlete gauges where they live between baseline wattage and the plus 60 or 70, dependent upon how steep the hill is in front of them and how long it is. So if you have an absolute wall that is only 200 meters long, then you can definitely go to your plus 60. If you have a climb that's 1.5 miles long, and a 2% grade, then maybe you ride that at plus 25 kind of thing. So breaking it out on the course, I have these different colored lines. I'll try to explain them as best I can. The orange, I'm sorry, that's purple. The lines that are purple, those represent sections that end in what I would consider to be kind of a descent. Okay. The green lines are sections that I consider to end in a climb. And then this baby blue line is a section that I represent to be, that I consider to be relatively flat-ish, at best. And these are just kind of general guidelines. So out of Sandy Hollow, and for a while, you're going to be probably riding baseline to baseline minus 10 watts. So if your baseline is 200 watts, you're going to be riding somewhere between 190 and 200, okay, because you're trending down. Then you're going to start climbing a bit, and it is a bit of a lengthy climb. So I'm not going to recommend that you go all the way to the cap because it is a lengthy climb. So you would ride baseline plus 25. So somewhere between 200 and 225 on this section right here that ends in the green. Then you drop. That looks like a pretty steep kind of drop. So that's probably going to be the kind of situation that's relatively difficult to keep the wattage up. So you do baseline minus 30. So somewhere between 170 and 200 as best you can on that section. Then we enter what I consider to be the flat zone of the course. We'll see how flat it ends up being, but that's where you're going to be the 200 to 205, maybe 210 for a while. And then this section from about, I guess I would call that 55 to about 80. That's about 25 miles. And then, and I forgot to mention this earlier section from about 15 to 25-ish. These are the danger zones. These are this first one represents the danger zone because there is still going to be a lot of ego out on the course. It's relatively early. The swim waves are going, there are going to be people coming out of the water who are really fast age groupers who are kind of trying to make up for lost time oftentimes all at once. And they're the kind of athletes who can make you feel like you're going backwards. And you really need to ignore that. So it's a danger zone because in this section, I would say, because you're going to have to work to ignore what's going on around you in this challenging part of the course. This part is a danger zone because I expect that it's going to be pretty exposed. It's going to be a long climb. Even if it's not necessarily always a hard climb, it's going to be a long climb. You're going to have to be careful not to overwatt it. Okay, so I'm recommending probably the baseline plus 15, maybe plus 20. So the 200 to 220 range. And you're also just, because it's so long, you're really going to have to focus on your cadence to make sure that you don't kind of slip into that grinding situation of 3 to 4 RPMs lower than you normally would, particularly if there is wind. Okay, so then you have this beautiful descent, and for this descent and the final descent into T2, both these sections, you're just going to do the best you can to keep the wattage up where necessary. It can actually be pretty beneficial to ride, to just kind of take it easy. Not too bad if you get a 20-minute rest going into T2. But the section before this baseline plus 30, that looks pretty steep. That looks like a pretty challenging section right there. So you're going to want to be careful there, but you do have some reprieve. In a way, it's a little bit like a 100-mile course, even though you're going to travel 112, but it's going to be a very challenging 100 miles. Bike course aid stations. Yeah, typical. Just be careful at the aid stations. Like I said, there's going to be people probably rushing through the aid stations. They're not going to want to pause and make sure they get the bottle correctly. So there's going to be a lot of drop bottles, a lot of bottles rolling around the course, around the aid station. So just be really, really careful because patience will not be high probably in the athletes. I'm not a huge fan of the Morton Gels nor the quantum bars, particularly for racing on the quantum bars. The quantum bars are probably pretty decent as a day-to-day bar, although they are loaded with caffeine. But they're probably a little high in fat protein for racing. The Morton Gels, I'll get to in a bit and talk about that. Just some common penalties on the bike course. Drafting, don't do that. 5-minute penalty for drafting. Keep 6 bike lengths between your bike's front wheel and the rear wheel of the cyclist in front of you. If you enter into the draft zone, if you enter into the 6 bike length region between your wheel and the athlete in front of you, you must exit it through the front. Okay, so you must exit it with a pass. You are not allowed to go back. Okay, and you have 25 seconds to make that pass. Okay, so just be aware of that. 3 violations of any combination of penalties equals a red card and disqualification. There is a littering violation, which is a blue card. That is most likely a littering violation that is like an unintended littering, where you're riding down the course and a gel pack falls out of your jersey. That's the kind of thing, even though you didn't do it, it happened. And that's the kind of penalty that would get you a blue card. You do have to be careful of intentional littering. So an athlete who, instead of the gel pack is falling out of their jersey, who takes the gel and then just drops it to the ground, that is potentially a DQable offense. So, in my opinion, rightfully so. Be careful of blocking, particularly on this, in a world championship event. As best you can, stay to your right. Let the passes pass you on the left, just like the highway situation. And if you do receive a penalty, don't. But if you do, then you must stop at the very next penalty tent. And those penalty tents are clear, they are obvious, they are big, and they are yellow. And you must stop at that. You can't approach a penalty tent that has a lot of people in it and say, I'll just get to the next one. No, that you will get DQ'd for that. All right, run course. Very hilly run course, 54 feet per mile. That ain't nothing. The very little shade on the course. Is a 2-loop course. You must have your bib number. This is the kind of course where, particularly the time of day, you're going to be running it somewhere, in the 1 o'clock to well, probably 7 o'clock, where the sun is going to be around time frame. So it could get very, very hot. Say high 80s, 90. So definitely sunscreen, ice at the aid stations. I think because of the nature of the course, the climbing and descent, as you look at the elevation profile, looks like a little bit of a roller coaster. I think it's going to be pretty rough on the quads, particularly this second half of the race, coming down this section and then coming to the finish. I think that's going to be very challenging on the quads. Going to beat you up. I am predicting, maybe I'll be wrong, maybe I'll be right, I don't know. I'm predicting a great deal of cramping out on this course. Low humidity. I expect that people probably won't necessarily drink as much as they should. Coupled with hot and warm conditions, coupled with overpacing, and coupled with the nature of this course, which is a good deal of descending to it, and kind of just being forgetful of all of those variables. That has the potential to kind of just create a drain on your sodium supply in the body. You'll be sweating it out and not really know it, which could end up in a lot of cramping. So plan accordingly. Run course, use them. Obviously, I think that these are really good time to power walk. I would highly recommend power walking through every single aid station, using the time to get your nutrition down. Take a cup of sports drink through every aid station. If you're taking a Cliff Block or every 2 miles, or taking a gel every 4 miles or so, something along those lines, this is a good time to take the time to get down. Walk with purpose, but it's a good reset for the legs, and kind of prevents the plodding that can happen during an Ironman. I recommend keeping sodium tablets on your person during the race, even if because you're in with that, having the sodium on your person. If you notice salt on your kit, remember the swim is not in a salted body of water. So if you notice salt on your kit or on your skin, just take salt tablets. You can typically not go too wrong with taking an abundance of salt, particularly in these kinds of conditions. And if they're light, they're very mobile. And if you don't use them, I'm sure there will be plenty of people on the course who could. So you can, as an act of goodwill, give them to somebody else who's in trouble. This is my complaint about the Morton Gels. They are a very low sodium gel. I personally actually like the consistency of them. They have a very different kind of consistency. It's almost, I won't call it like a custard because that wouldn't be accurate, but it's not the typical gel. It's a little thicker, I think that I would say, than your typical gel. I'm having trouble coming up with a descriptor of the consistency of it. But I like the consistency, but the sodium is just, it's in my opinion, insufficient. At 22 milligrams, it is 180 milligrams light per gel. So it's, for lack of a better term, kind of, I mean, it's better than nothing, but it's unacceptable. The caffeinated gels, which are the ones in white. Okay, so the gels in black are uncaffeinated. The gels in white are caffeinated, and they only come in 100 milligrams of caffeine. So still the 22 milligrams of sodium, but 100 milligrams of caffeine. And as a singular hit, that's not a huge deal, but over the course of the day, that can really start to wear on your stomach and your GI system. So it's just a lot of caffeine in a single gel. So I recommend doing your best to stay relatively self-sufficient gel wise. This is where the Gatorade gels just are really, really good. They have an appropriate amount of sodium at 200 milligrams, and carbohydrate wise, they're a little lighter than the Morton gels. The Gatorade gels have 20 grams of carbohydrate, where the Mortons have 25. But if you were to take, 3 Gatorade gels an hour, you'd be right in line. You'd be in a good spot. Transitions. I kind of mentioned this earlier. One key thing about transitions is that you want to be quick, but you do not want to rush. Okay, get your transition right the first time. I mentioned kind of this idea earlier, but as Dwight Eisenhower once said, a plan is useless, but planning is priceless. So as you kind of finish, as you are finishing the swim and you're finishing the bike, you know, if you have about 400 meters left in the swim, maybe 300 meters, and you have 5 miles left on the bike, hey, you're going to be descending for 10 miles. You might as well think about something. Start to plan out what you are going to do when you get to transition. What am I going to put my, I'm going to take my bike shoes off. Am I going to change my socks? Am I going to wipe down my feet? Am I going to change my shirt? Am I going to do a full Beyonce like wardrobe change? Just kind of start to plan that out. You probably won't do it in the same way that you plan it, but having thought about it, you will be that much further along. And those are really good times to kind of switch your brain to the thing that you're going to be doing next. Okay. So as you're finishing up the swim and as you're descending into town on the bike, start to think about how am I going to behave when I get into transition? So you can be as efficient as possible so that you can be quick, but you don't rush through it. Okay. You don't want to rush. It's better to take the extra 15 seconds putting your shoes on than to try and force your foot into your shoe, end up creasing your insole beneath your foot such that a half mile into the run, you need to stop, take your shoe off, uncrease the insole, put it back in, just take the extra 15 seconds in the first place, okay? It will make a big, big difference. I promised a little bit of mental fitness talk. Here it is, goals, targets, and outcomes. This is just kind of a Venn diagram that I drew up, I think last summer. It kind of outlines the differences between goals, targets, and outcomes. I think the word goals we get in trouble I think we misuse the word goals, and how we define them is, so in the Venn diagram, the larger Venn diagram, represented by the blue circle. The blue circle is representative of things over which we have complete and total control. Okay. And goals are the kinds of things that we tend to have our most control over. The way we use goals, the word goals, is different often. Okay, we often use the word goals to represent what we really mean to be as outcomes. Okay, but I'll get into that in a second. But goals are the things that if we use them, if we set them properly, that we failing to achieve a goal ends up being a choice that we make. Okay, for example, what is an example of a goal? Say you're in the first 10 miles of the bike and you have a wattage number of 200 watts and everybody else is going bananas and flying by you. A goal is that I will hold back in my wattage when people ride by. I will stick to my wattage. That's a goal. Okay. You have total control over whether you stick to your 200 watts or you ride 230 watts to keep up with Joe. Okay. Another goal is I will drink every 10 minutes. Okay. You have a choice. You can make a choice whether or not you will drink. Okay. What's next? So if we achieve our goals, okay, which is the things we choose to do, you either choose to achieve a goal or you choose not to. Okay. If we choose to achieve our goals, that sets us up well to achieve our targets. And targets are things that we still have control over, but less so than goals. They are things that are somewhat outside of our control. Okay. I want to go sub 11 on the course. Okay. I will try to hold 9-minute pace for the first 13 miles. Okay. Those are targets which are hopefully premised in good hard data. And if not, then you have poor targets, but your targets should be based upon your training data. And if those are appropriate for where you are in your training, then the achievement of your goals, the choices you make early on, will put you in a better position to hold 9-minute pace for the first 13 miles. Okay. Lastly, we have the thing that I think we most often misperceive as goals, And those are outcomes. Those are things over which we have very little control. Okay. I won't say we have zero control, but we have very little control. I want to qualify for Kona. Okay. Well, and at this race, you kind of already have, but that is an outcome. Okay. I want to be top 5 in my age group. Okay. That is an outcome. If you choose to achieve your goals, it will put you in a better position to hit your targets. And if you hit your targets, the outcomes will land where they land, because you have the outcome goal. I'll call it the outcome goal. Okay. The outcome aim to qualify for Kona, but so does everybody else. So for you to be successful in achieving your outcome, a whole bunch of people have to fail. Okay. I want to be top 5 in my age group. So does everybody else. Okay. And for you to achieve your outcome aim, everybody but you and 4 others has to fail in their outcome aim. So just kind of something to consider and wrap your head around as you kind of think through these final 2 weeks before the race. Pretty much lastly, just some special nutrition offers. We have Gatorade Endurance, 25% off. You can access these or a page to these using that QR code. That QR code works. Clean Athlete, 15% off. Juice Performer, 20% off. Moxie Life, 25% off. And Picky Bars, 25% off. I guess I would say no. Any questions?
We do have a few in the chat box, Tim.
All right.
All right.
Can you just ask me, I guess?
Yes, I can ask him to you. Okay, so first one is 2 questions. What do you suggest for protein for a vegetarian the day prior to the race? Also, I've thrown up the applesauce before 3 races. Any suggestions?
Okay, let me hit the second one first. You've thrown up applesauce 3 times before the races. I would practice it again in the next 2 weeks. If it could be an anxiety issue, so keep that in mind. That doesn't mean it's not a real issue, though, right? But if you just do not have confidence in the apple, you need to have confidence in what you put in your body on the morning of a race, because better to put in the imperfect thing than nothing. So I would probably go towards things like relatively plain bagels. A plain bagel with jelly. If you can avoid the nut butters, that would be good. We just kind of don't need the fat. So bagels with jelly, like something along those lines that's a little easier on the stomach. The protein for a vegetarian, I don't know. If you email me that question, tim@QT2systems.com, I will get you an answer, but I don't know the answer to that myself, particularly on race morning.
Okay, the next question is, are the descents like Lake Placid and fast, or are they more rolling?
They are going to tend to be a little more, they're going to be somewhere in between. They very wide expanses of road, for particularly into T2. Probably windier because they're going to be more open. They probably won't necessarily be as fast as Placid, but you're going to have a probably more lead up time going into them. And the views are better. I'll say that. That's for sure. The views are amazing to catch those. And probably slightly better pavement than, well, I shouldn't say slightly, it's Placid. Probably better pavement than Placid. I would expect something to feel more, it's going to be slightly slower than Placid on the descents. There's going to feel like there's more room on the descents because the roads are just larger. Also, the pavement's going to be better, but the wind could be the wind could be present, and that could be a factor.
Okay, the next question on here is the Gatorade website up and running to order directly?
That's a solid question. I don't know the answer to that. Email me, tim@qt2systems.com, and I will work to get an answer. Gatorade, just generally speaking, Gatorade seems to be, and this is not just us. I have a close friend who owns a bike shop, and he sells a lot of Gatorade Endurance, and he cannot get it. They seem to be struggling to meet demands. I don't know if you've heard, but there's a supply chain shortage in the country, in the world, really, and Gatorade seems to be affected as well. I have seen that it does exist on Amazon, which does us no good for the 25% discount. And we are, Chrissy has been kind of peppering them on a weekly basis about when are we going to be able to access our stuff or our pathway towards Gatorade Endurance. So, but in a pinch, I've seen it available on Amazon. That's not the best answer, but that's the answer I have.
Okay. Next question, another favorite. Do you know if the QT2 kits will be available before the race?
Do I know? No, I don't know, but I think that's gonna happen. It is expected that they will be here. Wait, what is today? Today's the 20th. So I believe that they are going to be here by the end of the month of April. So the end of the month of April, and we're going to do a very quick turnaround to get them out to the set of athletes who we have racing in St. George and at Gulf Coast.
That's all the questions in the chat box right now. Does anyone have any additional questions for Tim?
Hey, Tim, it's Chad. I have a question pre-swim. If it's cold, I'm always hesitant in doing a warm-up swim because then my wave doesn't start until like a half hour, and I'm worried about just sitting there getting cold and trying to stay warm. Is a mile run before the race, easy pace, is that going to be just as good?
It's better than nothing. I mean, that's just going to bring you to 27.2 miles for the day. So my primary concern on the I like the idea of warming up. It's very important, right? I get my primary concern on getting a swim warm up is there's a bit of a safety factor involved with water at that temperature and anxiety and kind of going out too quickly, like in a shock to the system from going from comfortable air temperature to very cold water, but also from rest to high intensity. Those things can get dangerous at times. So I appreciate what you're saying with regards to being cold. I wonder if there are other possibilities in terms of getting in the water and having the body knowing what that's going to feel like on your head.
Yep.
And when the water hits the wetsuit or inside the wetsuit, and maybe having some outer garbs, some throwaway stuff that you can just ditch.
All right, that's good. That's fair. Thanks for addressing that.
And we have another question that just came in the chat box. I'm in the last age group wave. Do you know if they will leave T1 open longer for the later waves?
Will they leave it open longer? Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I do not know the answer to that. That wave starts at 8:06, correct? And the race will start at the age group race will start at 6:45. I would guess that they're going to close transition if the pro race starts at 6:15. Transition will probably close at, say, 7, around there. That will be clearly marked in the athlete guide. We didn't make note of that, but that will be clearly marked in the athlete guide. I'm going to guess that T1 will close at about 7 to have everybody out by the time for when the pro men start coming in.
They had a note here that they left it open later in September for the 70.3.
Oh, well, there you go.
But yeah, it seems like it would have to close before the pros get in. Next question, do they transport gear to T2 or do we have to go back to T1 after the race?
I expect that they will transport. I did the race. I did this Ironman back in the original in St. George in 2010, and they transported all of that stuff. I would plan that they're gonna bring it for you. Then to that end, just make sure, because bringing it all for you it's relatively simple. You're gonna bring the bike to T2. All they have to do is bring the bags. They're not gonna want to have all those people coming back to Sandy Hollow. It's just easier for them to bring it back. So I would expect that they'll bring it back. I would highly expect that they'll bring it back.
Any other questions? All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop recording. If anyone has a question that they want to ask offline, you can do that as well. So let me stop that now.